Just before we get into this video, guys, if you want to follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, the links are here. And if you also want to support me on Patreon as well and help out my channel, that would be absolutely awesome as well. But let's get on with the video. I'm doing Big Finish reviews, guys, because people kept asking me and saying talk about Big Finish more, so I am. Now, this is something that I've been meaning to get into for a long time, because Big Finish has been producing Doctor Who audios for yonks, like a very long time, and there's so many different Doctors on there now, including Doctors that don't technically exist within the canon, but you know, fuck the canon, who knows what that is anymore. So many different spin-offs as well, so many different stories that they have told. It gets to a point where it's intimidating, because it's like, where do I start? But because I'm someone who travels a lot, I thought, well, if I'm on trains and whatever, I may as well listen to something like a Big Finish audio. So that is what I've decided to do, and I decided to start with the 8th Doctor stuff, as you can tell from the title and the thumbnail of this very video that you are currently watching, because the 8th Doctor is an underrated Doctor, I feel, and the main reason for this is because he had one TV movie and one mini-sode, but there's a plethora of 8th Doctor stuff from Big Finish, and I wanted to get to know this Doctor a little bit more, because whilst I like his 2 on-screen appearances, it's not the best that Doctor Who has to offer. So today, again, like you can tell from the title, I'm going to be talking about the very first audio adventure from Big Finish featuring Paul McGann as the 8th Doctor, Storm Warning. Going into this audio, I wasn't really sure what to expect. I know that the Paul McGann stuff is highly regarded by Big Finish listeners. For me, that is always kind of like a red flag, and I know that sounds mental, but hear me out. Usually when somebody says that stuff is amazing, stuff is incredible, you really need to check this out, I never do it, because I've got this weird thing where I'm like, well, it's never going to live up to my expectations, so I may as well just not bother. Again, I know it's stupid and whatnot, but I thought, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to go with the Paul McGann audios, and I checked this one out, and I've got to say, overall, it is kind of like a generic style Doctor Who story, but it's executed incredibly well. I mean, again, I'm no expert, but I would also suggest that as a jumping on point, this would also be a good place to start. I know that certain people have said, nah, don't worry about the Charlie Pollard era, go straight to Lucy Miller and whatnot. But for me, I wanted to hear it all. Like I said, it is kind of like your generic run-of-the-mill Doctor Who story, in the sense that it takes a historical event. I'm not actually sure if it's true or if it's a fictional historical event. I have a feeling it's real, but I could be wrong on that. I don't know. I really should have done a bit more research going into this video, but you know, as always, never prepared. But yeah, historical event, you had a couple of alien things in there, or alien themes, and you've got yourself a Doctor Who story. It's something that we have seen countless times in both the classic era and the new era of the show. It's a formula that works. It is very formulaic at this point, but when executed properly, it's still very enjoyable. Storm Warning is a prime example of that. Now, the historical event in question is an airship, like a big balloon thing, Zeppelin, whatever they're called. One of them, it's crashing, and the Doctor ends up on board, and alien shenanigans ensue. From the get-go, I've got to say, Paul McGann instantly falls back into the role of the Doctor. And considering that this was like, what, 5 years after the TV movie when this came out? Pretty good, considering that he'd only done it once. With the others who do Big Finish, you understand it a little bit more, because they are far more adjusted to their characters. Whereas Paul McGann's Doctor didn't really get a chance to breathe. He was just there, and then he wasn't. He didn't really get a fair crack at a whip. So to hear Paul McGann, probably how he should have been if he had gone to a series, was a joy to listen to. It really was. Paul McGann's Doctor has got a real childish giddiness about him. He's very capable of doing the playing the idiot thing, but he's also very capable of just switching and being like, right, okay, I need to take control of the situation now. I get the impression that the 8th Doctor is a very keen adventurer, and it's not something that you can say for all of the Doctors, really. Paul McGann's Doctor seems to get very excited about the fact that I'm going to be doing something. And I don't necessarily mean that because he never really got to do anything quite literally until this point. We also get introduced to an original companion, Charlie Pollard, as played by India Fisher, which was very bizarre for me because India Fisher, for those of you who don't know, is the narrator of MasterChef. So listening to her voice and not thinking about some knobhead souffle that Greg Wallace is going to dessert spoon into his fucking fat face was bizarre. But she's really good as well. Both India Fisher and Paul McGann have got a really nice chemistry right from the get-go. I don't know if this one was recorded first, I imagine it probably was, but if that's the case, great, they've hit the ground running. I really like the stories where a companion is introduced for the first time, because I really like seeing that relationship and that chemistry blossom, and I think from the very first story, you usually can tell how the dynamic is going to be, and you get a very clear indication of that in this story. And considering that I've heard this, and I've also heard the second story, Sword of Orion, I like where it's going. Now, to the actual story itself. Again, what I like about this is when a story can introduce you to certain characters and you sort of formulate an opinion on them, but as the story progresses, it turns out that your thoughts on that character were totally and utterly wrong. So, for example, there's one character in this where, at the beginning, I'm like, you're a dickhead, I don't like you. By the end of the story, he's actually a pretty cool character. And he's a character that you're just like, you know what, I should have given you a little bit more time because I think I wrote you off a little bit too quickly. On the flip side of that, you got another character that starts off alright and you're like, he seems cool. And then as the story progresses, I shouldn't have given you as much time as I did because you're a knobhead. In terms of like alien threats in this story, there are two, pretty much. You've got these like pterodactyl things, I can't remember what they're called, they're like velociraptors or something like that. And they're essentially, for people who haven't heard this, the only way I can sort of describe them is almost like, kind of like Reapers in a sense from Father's Day, but not really. They basically live in the time vortex and they feed off of the stuff in the time vortex, I think. That sort of thing. They're not really a major part of the story. To be honest, it's a bit weird why they're there. I don't really think they needed to be there, but they're a nice addition. You've also got these other aliens who, again, are really quite weird and quite a unique idea because they work in 3 different factions. So you've got one lot that are sort of like the brains, you've got one lot that are like anger sort of thing, and then you've got another lot which I can't remember. They have names for them specifically, and I can't remember what they were called. Again, not prepared. I'm fucking great at reviewing. Top-notch channel. Subscribe. But anyway, I like the fact that you've got these creatures that are split into 3 and you see different elements of these creatures. They're not a whole being. They're 3 separate things, but they're also a society made up of the 3 different things. It's a really unique idea, especially because you know at some point the evil one, the anger side, that is the one that is going to end up being the major overarching threat in this story. And sure enough, yeah, it is. However, for me, that's also kind of where I lost interest in the story, which is annoying because I was really enjoying this story, but the bits where like the bad guys reveal themselves to be the bad guys and then, you know, they go off on one and you've got the doctor and everyone else trying to figure out what to do, that to me was the least interesting bit about this entire thing. I was more interested in this airship crashing. I was more interested in seeing the doctor and Charlie and their relationship develop. I was more interested in the different characters that were on the airship and what they were going to do. To be honest, this was one of those stories where, as clever as it was, the alien interference sort of fell a little bit flat. It started off good and it started off really interesting, but the more and more it went on, I was a bit lukewarm on it. It's not to say that it's bad, because I definitely did enjoy it and I did think that it was done really, really well. But for me at the same time, I just feel like it took something away from the story as a whole. It was nice and it kind of needed to be there, because I think if this was a pure historical, I probably would be sat here saying that it was a bit dull and a bit boring and it needed some sort of alien interference. So it's a bit of a catch-22 and I'm an awkward bugger. However, what I especially liked about this story is it is a historical event, and therefore, as we know, the laws of time, they can't be changed, because wibbly wobbly timey wimey stuff, you know, fixed points, all that sort of crap that you get in the modern era, it's that kind of thing. And because the doctor does something that he shouldn't have done, he's now sort of just thinking to himself, well shit, I shouldn't have done that. And from what I've heard, that is going to be a recurring theme and the story arc for this era of the 8th Doctor on audio. And I'm really excited to see where it goes because it's interesting. I like it when it's not just a simple case of the doctor arrives, sorts everything out and then leaves. I like where there's consequences for the doctor's actions, and I like when the doctor does something wrong. Even though the thing that he does might seem like the right thing to do, in the grand scheme of things, it was the wrong decision. So I'm really curious to see where that goes. For me though, I really enjoyed this as a whole thing. I enjoyed a lot of the characters. I enjoyed the dynamics between Paul McGann and India Fisher. I enjoyed the different concepts that they were putting forward. I liked the setting. It was generic and there was a clever idea with the monster, but I don't know, it's just, I found it a little bit dull when it came to that sort of stuff. But it's a solid entry and it was a solid first start, and I would highly recommend this, to be honest, because it was highly accessible, I thought. And I'm also really excited to be diving into Big Finish a hell of a lot more because it's been overdue. I've needed to do it. I've listened to various different, you know, the odd story here and there, but I never really got invested in it, whereas now I am. So every now and again, one of these will pop up, a Big Finish review, and I'll talk about whatever story it is that I've been listening to. Whether it's even Doctor Who, I might branch out and listen to other stuff. I'm going to branch out and listen to other stuff. I've already decided what I'm listening to. Overall though, Storm Warning, 7.5 out of 10. That's what I'm going to give it. In the comments below though guys, let me know what you think of Storm Warning. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments below. And please no spoilers for the rest of the 8th Doctor stuff because I am really curious to see where it goes. I'll happily take recommendations though. A load of you guys did give me some on Twitter, so keep them coming in. Spare Parts I will review at some point because of course I will. I have heard that and it's incredible. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like on it, subscribe for more. Social media and Patreon links will be in the description as always. And if you would support me on any of those things, I'd absolutely love you forever. But till next time guys, you take care of yourselves. Goodbye.